So, welcome everyone to the Ecopsychology Voices, an interview series with some of ecopsychology's luminaries. Hello, my name is Carol Koziel. I'm the founder of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network, the sponsor of this event, and myself, along with Linda Bazell, co-created this series. Today, Deb Bridge will interview Dr. Sandra Easter. Deb has a 30-year career in education and currently is finishing up her dissertation at Pacifica Graduate Institute in depth psychology with an emphasis in community psychology, liberation psychology, and ecopsychology. Deb, thanks for joining us and take it away.
Well, I am so happy to be here. And I just want to start with thanking Sandra for writing this book. So I want to just hold up the book for those who haven't seen it. It has been compelling. I've been carrying it with me everywhere for this past month, which is interesting because it has given rise to a number of questions to people who are like, oh, what's that about? You know, so that's been good. So I'm just going to jump right in, Sandra. So in your book, you write about...
I want to say thank you. You know, one of the things that Alan Kilpatrick, who teaches at Pacifica, and he's Cherokee, one of the things he said to me at the end of my dissertation defense was, now your work has a life of its own. You have no idea where it will go and where it will take you. And what you just said, you know, is just so beautifully that.
Well, yeah, I see. It's kind of like you've been with me to all my doctor's appointments.
Well, good. I'll give you some cards, and you can do some shameless self-promotion for me.
There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I was struck by the fact that you write about modern humans. So those of us of this age have become less conscious, if not even totally unconscious, of the dynamic relationship that we have with the earth and the land that we actually literally sit upon. So I'm wondering if you'd speak to how this disconnect, this unconsciousness impacts us as a people collectively, and also our relationship with the land.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a big question. And, you know, the evidence of the consequences of not recognizing that we are connected are evident everywhere in modern culture. And they're evident in our bodies. They're evident in the land. And the disconnection that you're talking about, Jung wrote about, and he equated that with what he called the discontents of civilization. And when we lose connection with our roots, and for me, roots are interesting because we have roots in psyche, roots in our body, roots in our ancestry, and roots in the land. And again, it's like shifting awareness to what I've experienced as what I would call a more indigenous, and indigenous meaning connected with the land awareness. And when I experience myself in that way, I don't even need the word interconnected, because it is the experience that I'm having. In modern Western culture, we've separated mind from body. We've separated from what Jung would call the unconscious, roots of psyche. And Jung differentiates between the roots of psyche and the roots in the earth and the roots in body, but he says they are one and the same, just as mind is to body, body is to earth, and earth is to psyche. And one of the things I love about Jung is that, you know, most of my ancestors are probably Western European, not all, but most. And so his psychology allows us to situate, those of us who are modern Western, to situate our indigenous roots in a psychology that is modern. So I encourage people who are interested in this to really take a look at Jung or read my book because I've digested it all. You don't have to read the collected works. And then you can go on your own exploration and journey. But I also studied with Malidoma Somé, who is a Dogara elder. And he really serves as a bridge between modern Western people, modern Western consciousness, and the worldview and indigenous consciousness of his people. He also says that the problems that we're having are a result of our lack of rootedness.
Wow. I'm sorry, I got stuck on Malidoma Somé because his work has been so important. And so I'm just feeling the need to share this a little bit. I attended, I don't know, Sandra, if you were there for Hillman's memorial service.
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so
At
I
least
attended.
not in body.
There you go. You are part of that land for sure. Michael Mead kind of emceed it, and we literally, sorry, my computer just turned on.
It's Hillman speaking from beyond the grave.
It's really bizarre. And I can't turn it off. Okay, it went off. It's going in for a new hard drive today. But anyway, Michael Mead had us do this thing where we literally sang Hillman into ancestorhood with a Dagara chant, which was just great. I'm sorry, this is really
You know, people ask me, Deb, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute while you kind of collect your thoughts. You know, I know one of the questions that comes up often is, you know, how do the ancestors speak to us? And I would say, you know, especially in modern Western culture, it's not just through the land, through the air that we are sharing, the breath that we share with all of creation, but it's also through technology. And so it's like, maybe I should shut up and we should listen to your computer.
Well, it's interesting. I've been following this YouTube about a woman who has been living in her car in Oceanside, California. Very positive. I mean, she takes a very positive thing in it. But anyway, we'll have to digest that later. So back to what's at hand. I like that you you quote Esther Harding, who's one of my favorite people to go to in reading the earlier thoughts. But she relays that Jung says that ancestors seem to be in the land. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak to what that means. What does it mean to experience ancestors, either our own individually or collectively, even as a nation? What it is to experience our ancestors as being in the land?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, there's all different kinds of ways to answer it. So what I want to do is read something that I wrote for a presentation that I did on ancestors in the land. And what I invite people to do as you listen to this is to see what you experience as your connection with the ancestors. Well, let's start with your own body, with your ancestors, with your breath, and with the land. And it's a short quote, and then I'll talk about it from that place of connection. When we breathe, we share breath and spirit with the land. When we live, we share our energy with the land. And when we die, we share that energy in a different way. When future generations live on the land, they share their energy with us, who are ancestors, and with the land. We will become part of the land, and when our descendants speak of the land, they will speak of us too. We can connect with the land simply by listening to our own hearts. So take a moment and just notice what's happening in your body, if anything. And notice what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're seeing. I was privileged to listen to a Navajo elder in Santa Fe. His name is Frank Morgan. And he is, like Malidoma, just a wonderful bridge between that more indigenous way of being and this modern Western egoic way. He's able to bridge it in his own consciousness and to bridge the concepts of his people with the concepts of science and modern Western culture. And he was speaking at a conference center, and he was talking about how his people and many of us have lost the wisdom of the ancestors. And he said, it's all here right now, in the trees, in the rocks, in the grass, in the water, in the air. And as he was talking, the doors, and you got to imagine, it's like, this is like an old chapel. These doors are like monstrous. I mean, it would take like 200 people, strong people, to lift them up, just one of them. And there are two of them. And as he's speaking, the wind blows the doors open and they slam to the side. And I was stunned. And I thought, this is true. This is the truth. And the wind spoke. Jung talks about the ancestors in the land from a very modern Western psychological, actually I call it a medico-psychological scientific view. But he also experienced them as being very, very present. And his perspective was we can access them by being in relationship with the unconscious. And again, it's as I talk about this, I realize it's like, okay, we can differentiate. However, there is no separation. And the ancestors in the land, when we are unconscious of them, will come at us like fierce forces, because they must be heard, especially if there are things that are out of balance. Fred Gustafson wrote a book, Dancing Between Two Worlds. And he talks about the grief that saturates this American soil. And so many people I know, I mean, Joanna Macy, helps people connect with that grief. And a lot of times, white people have shame about what happened, and Indigenous people are still struggling with the trauma that they experienced. And what Fred Gustafson says is we need to listen. We need to hear the cries of the ancestors, of all of our ancestors, and respond in ways that are reparative. And what joins the blame and the shame, what joins us all, is the grief that we all feel. And I think right now on this land, and I can't speak about what happened in Canada, so I'm talking as an American on this American soil, and I even feel it now as I sit here and I keep hearing, what I'm hearing is Arapaho, Arapaho, Arapaho. And I believe Boulder is the land of the Arapaho people. And when we listen, they come in dreams, they can come on the wind, they can come through uh, the soles of our feet on the earth. And when we don't listen, it fucks us up. Hope I didn't offend anybody, but there's no better word.
So actually, I think I do remember reading that you talk about how when things in our world are fucked up, that it really could be a message from the ancestors saying, really kind of, get your act together. Things aren't going well and we need you to. And we do it not just for ourselves, but for them as well. We're still doing work for the ancestors, for them. That's part of our, I think, heritage,
Yeah, what comes to mind, I'm just so touched that you have really responded to my work in this way, because in my experience, there's nothing more important that we can do for the earth or for our descendants. Hopefully there'll be more than 1 or 2 more generations that will be able to survive. And I'm talking about human beings, because our ancestors are animals and trees and, but I'm talking about human beings now. There's nothing more important that we can do than listen and respond. And as I said in the beginning, Jung said, hey, this is the result of years of not tending what he would call the unconscious psyche. Malidoma would say, this is a result of years of not tending to the things that are out of balance and out of harmony. And I like really using the concept not of healing or fixing, but of restoring balance and harmony. And that's what Jung is instructed to do. He said it is in service to well-being, not your well-being, but well-being. And each of us has a specific ancestry. So what each of us is called to do is unique and individual to us. And we can hear the ancestors through our dis-eases, whether it's psychological or physical or relational. And if we pay attention to our symptoms, we can hear the voices of the ancestors speaking. If we listen carefully, we will be guided about what must be done in order to restore balance and harmony in service to, quote, healing the ancestors and in service to the young'uns who will follow. And what was so remarkable to me was after working with personal trauma and ancestral trauma and the trauma in the land for my dissertation, what I realized through my younger daughter, Margaret, was it's all about love. And it's all about love flowing freely. And that's where Jung's work of the complexes becomes so important, especially for those of us who are modern Western egoic consciousness oriented, because he gives us a way to work with ancestral traumas and ancestral things that are out of balance in a way that is psychological using his complex theory. And again, I know that that may not be something that people understand, but I've explained it well in my book. And there's a way to use Jung's psychology and his idea of the complexes to bridge into what people like the Dogra people and the Navajo already are doing. Did that answer the question?
And more.
Okay. I'm listening as I speak, by the way.
It's really great. I feel like we could go on for hours probably, but keeping in mind the time limits we do have. One of the things I've reflected on is my own ancestry, and that came up even in my study at Pacifica. And I had never really thought about this before that, but I am first generation in this country. And So I'm wondering if you could speak to what you have found around how does that impact when, I am not living on the land of my ancestors. So I have a huge disconnect there. And on my mother's side, my mother was an immigrant. And even on my father's side, I'm only third generation here. So I am ancestrally still really back in Europe, But on the other hand, I think there's something around the idea of the spirits that live in the land, the ancestors that live in the land upon which I was born, now play a role in my life as well as my biological ancestors. So
absolutely, absolutely. Think of your body as the land, and your DNA carries in your bones. Your ancestors are in your very bones.
this is true.
And yeah, it gets complex for Americans. And Jung wrote about that, and he said that the shadow for Americans is very complex because of what you're talking about. And yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to pick up on that comment because you talk about that in your book and how that Americans have then, our whole struggle with racism then gets pulled into this idea of the American shadow, that somehow Americans have now then projected our shadow onto minority races. Is that what you were saying? Did I get that right?
That is a part of it. And when Jung talks about it, he says that, and again, remember, this was like, early, mid 1900s. And he said that the American psyche, and he was working mostly with people who have your kind of ancestry, who are European, mostly European. And he said that the African American, and he used the word Negro, and the Indian, American Indian, show up in the psyche of those people who are the Europeans who are living on this continent. And so it makes a very complex shadow, because you not only have the shadow of your own ancestors, but you are encountering the shadow of the history of this land, because the history lives in the land. And you're also encountering the shadow that is in the land itself of the indigenous people who are here. So here's the simple, because I think the question comes up then, okay, so what do I do?
That's right where my head was going, yes.
I heard that. And this is where the tree comes in. So it's about consciousness. And this other piece just comes in as an aside. What Fred Gustafson told me is that when one's people have lived here for 7 generations, one is indigenous to the land in the way Native people would be. And that is my experience, being 11th generation from ancestors back in the 1600s. But I also have immigrants in my dad's side of the family. So, and also I heard my grandfather, and he's like, yeah, and I came from Ireland in the 1900s. And I'm like, okay, got it. Okay, y'all. So you're getting a sense of the complexity. Now here's, again, where Jung becomes so integral to figuring this out. I had a dream, and I dreamed of my mother line. And in the dream, my mother line went all the way back to a tree that had a fiery figure in it. It's not an accident that I'm sitting in front of this tree. And when I think about it and relate to it, it's very Celtic. And the significance of that is that dream brought me into relationship with my own indigenous psychic roots, what Jung would call the archaic man. When I am in touch with that, I am in touch with my indigenous ancestral roots, part of them. I hear the other ones screaming and they're like, there's so much more, and it's like, yes, there's the Scandinavian stuff, and they've got a very interesting, the stories that go with those indigenous roots are different in each culture. But when you get to the fundamental level of what Jung calls the archaic man, forgive him for being a man of the, early 20th century, then we know and understand whatever the places are that we are in relationship with in that way of an archaic, indigenous, what Jung would have called primitive, God forgive him again, consciousness. So coming into relationship with the land that our feet are on and that our bodies are, that we fall asleep on every night, that we wake up to every morning, happens not as a mental exercise, but by reconnecting in the psyche to that indigenous part of the psyche.
So Sandra, when you talk about Jung using the words archaic and primitive, I of course hear a lot of argument about that and kind of dissing of Jung for using those words. But I sometimes wonder whether we're not projecting our own interpretation of those words onto Jung when he's using them, because I think we see the words archaic and primitive as being negative. And yet I've wondered whether it really isn't more pointing to, the being indigenous, the indigeneity of each of us, and so that I don't think those words are as problematic as a number of Jungians seem to take it to be. What are your thoughts on that?
The word shame comes to mind. And finding language, especially if one is staying in this English language, which is very noun-verb based. It's very different than Navajo or Lakota. And finding the right language is challenging. And we can look back at, I like what you're saying, because we can look back at Jung from this perspective of, I think, very rigid political correctness and see things and go, oh, you're bad. Well, yeah, we need to recognize the shadow in his work. However, not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And recognize, which is what you did, what does he mean when he's saying primitive? Well, sometimes he's just using it in a descriptive way. Sometimes it is derogatory because he sees it as less than. So being able to separate out, but Gregory Cajete, who's a Tiwa Indian, he's in Albuquerque, and he talks about it in a different way, and he talks about the metaphoric mind. And the metaphoric mind is something that we're all born with. And so different language to try and describe different things. And I think the shame piece that kind of came right to mind when you first asked that question is related to Gustafson's work, which is the shame that we, as white people, it's like we were talking before the interview about even using the word indigenous. Oh my God, I hope I don't get it wrong. Well, it's important to tend to that and to be sensitive. However, I'm just putting this together now, I think if we worked with our own shame, we would see it possibly more in the way that you just described, which is, well, what is he really saying? Where is the shadow? Does the fact that there's shadow in it discount everything that he's saying, or is there value in it?
So being of European descent and being here, I really resonate when you talk about the shame, and yet my sense is that shame can be paralyzing. And so we get to the, oh my God, I don't know. And I know even halfway through my dissertation, I went through this whole thing of, I'm a white woman, I shouldn't be writing this. And it was through a couple of dreams.
I can relate.
Yes, keep on, don't stop, don't erase me was actually what was said. Because in a dream, I was trying to erase it on a computer. I was hitting the erase button. But anyway, so I think if we work through the shame, what would be the next thing that arises if we can get past the shame?
Well, it's so simple. Again, that word love comes up. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about the love that when I connect with the rain and I feel, sometimes the rain, in California, the rain was enraged. But that's also an expression of love.
You only get really angry at people that you really love, right?
That's great. I'm going to use that. Thank you, Deb. Yeah, and it's not getting past the shame. It's embracing the shame, listening to what it has to say, how it informs what's happening in the present, and doing reparative work personally, familially, collectively, and ecopsychologically. And it may be as simple as, like, again, this is where the dialogue with the ancestors comes in, listening and saying, tell me about your shame. Mm. And then recognizing, how does it live in you? And then what needs to be done right now, right here, that only you can do in this present moment.
Excellent. So just to kind of bring this portion to a close, I'm just wondering if you can just affirm or deny. That,
uh-oh, I'm on trial here.
I'm thinking, as you talk about that, what we can do is to really get in touch with what's unconscious. But you're speaking not so much of the personal unconscious, but the collective unconscious. And so practices such as active imagination, tending to dreams. I know for myself, a shamanic journey, I also see as another way of doing that. Are there other things that you would say or add to that?
Joseph Campbell has this simple thing. He said, come to know a place. Come to know a place, one place. And just sit, listen, be with. And I love actually walking barefoot on dirt, on leaves, on, the ground. That helps me really connect in my body to the body of the earth. The other thing, which happened this morning, and I was kind of stunned, and I thought, okay, at some point maybe this will come up in the interview. The ancestors speak in so many different ways. When my grandfather was first trying to get my attention, no, not the first time, but when I didn't listen the first time, I would find quarters everywhere where they hadn't been. And I started checking places like my gym locker, and I would clean it all out, check it, and there would be nothing in there. I would go back, I would put my clothes on, and there would be a quarter sitting in the bottom, and it was locked. And I was like, oh my God, no, shit like this doesn't happen, right? And it happened over and over and over again until I started listening and could listen in a different way. But the thing that happened this morning that was so stunning to me is I was thinking about this interview, and I like watching about 20 minutes of morning news just to get caught up. It's about all I can tolerate these days. And the first image that came on, it was on BBC, and they have that Planet Earth series. And the first image that came on was buffalo. Well, buffalo is very significant to me in terms of my roots and my connection with the land here, and also I think with my ancestors on other lands. And here it was in an image on the TV saying, hi, I'm here. I can't come into your backyard, but I am here with you. So through the images, through what Jung would call synchronicities, there are so many, they're always speaking and always asking for our attention. So if we just hold that awareness that, wow, maybe something is going on here. Maybe we are being addressed in each moment. Then we're open to seeing the ways that that communication is happening. It would be so easy for me to just have turned on the TV and said, you know, oh, that's the wrong channel. But because I hold that awareness of, you know, I need to be listening deeply. There's buffalo. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you. You know, thank you, ancestor buffalo.
Well, with that, let me just share one last thing that for the 30 years that I was in education, I lived an hour away from Buffalo, New York.
Well, then it's so perfect that you're doing this interview.
Exactly. We were meant to do this. They actually have statues of buffalo just randomly all over the place. Yeah. So that they're still roaming in a sense. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this work and bringing it to us.
Thank you, Deb. And, you know, there's one more thing, because it's very easy for us to doubt. And it's also very easy for us to invalidate those experiences. So when people start moving into this kind of relationship with the psyche and different ways of knowing, it's so vital to be a skeptic and to really be discerning and ask questions, because it's too easy to go woo-woo and frou-frou.
Yes, definitely. I have a response, but I'll hold myself because we need to open this up so that other people can have a chance to interact with you. So thanks again.
Thanks, Deb.